Hi, my name's Eliza, and last Saturday I stood 3 feet from a woman who was about to marry into my family and called me bad luck. She said it with a smile, like it was a joke, but it wasn't. Everyone heard it, and when I tried to step into the group photo, she waved her hand and said, "No, not her. She ruins everything she touches." My cousin laughed. People smirked. I stood there frozen in my lavender dress, the one I'd bought just for this day, wondering if I should pretend I didn't hear them. But then, my uncle, the groom, set down his champagne glass. He walked to the microphone, and what he said next didn't just stop the music, it stopped the wedding. They always said weddings bring people together. I think they meant it as a metaphor. But in my family, weddings bring out the worst. Old grudges dressed up in new dresses, fake hugs, and secrets stitched into lace. I should have known the minute I saw my name printed on the bottom line of the invitation, like an afterthought, that I wasn't truly welcome. But I came anyway, because it was his wedding. My Uncle Darren, the one person in my family who had ever looked at me like I mattered. The man who taught me how to ride a bike when my dad forgot. The man who called me on every birthday without fail, even when my own parents couldn't be bothered. When I was 16 and had a panic attack before a scholarship interview, he was the one who drove 3 hours just to wait outside in his car, so I'd feel safe. My bond with him wasn't just blood. It was built on the small, quiet moments no one else noticed. So yes, I knew the bride. Sabrina hated me. And yes, I knew my cousin Marla would use any chance to humiliate me. But I wasn't showing up for them. I was showing up for him. The first time I met Sabrina was at a family barbecue 2 years ago. She walked in like the air bent to make space for her. Tall, glamorous, all white linen and sharp smiles. I extended my hand. She looked me up and down, then said, "Oh, you're that Eliza, Darren's niece." Like it was a diagnosis. Marla snickered behind her wine cooler. You know, she's always been the awkward one, runs in the family. They laughed together like it was a private joke, even though I was standing 2 feet away. I remember clenching my lemonade so hard my knuckles turned white. Uncle Darren saw. He came over a minute later, handed me a plate of grilled corn, and said under his breath, "Ignore them. You don't owe people like that any of your softness." That stuck with me. But no amount of his kindness could soften what the rest of the family sharpened every time I showed up. My mother's sister, Uncle Darren's mom, once told me during Thanksgiving dinner that I reminded her of someone who always needed rescuing. I hadn't even spoken yet. Marla and Sabrina, though, they took it further. Sabrina believed in energy. She once posted on Instagram that she doesn't allow negativity or unbalanced frequencies near her food or her friends. Apparently, I was both. I once brought a gift to their engagement dinner, a simple framed photo of Uncle Darren and me at a local charity event we both supported. Sabrina opened it, stared, and said, "Oh, how quaint." Then set it aside. They all laughed again, always laughing, like cruelty became less sharp if you wrapped it in sound. Still, when the wedding invite arrived, pale cream with gold foil edges, I hesitated. I stared at it for 3 days. My name was there, but no +1, no handwritten note, just a generic printout. And yet there was one line that made me go. Reserved family seating, inner circle. I knew that wasn't Sabrina's doing, that was him. So I bought a dress. Not designer, not flashy. Lavender silk with capped sleeves and a waistline that made me feel like I belonged somewhere. I even had my hair professionally styled for once. As I looked in the mirror that morning, I whispered to myself, "Be quiet, but don't be invisible." That was the plan. But plans don't mean much when you're walking into a room full of people who've already decided you're the punchline. The venue was a private estate with marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, and an ego so big it didn't need a chandelier. It had 7. Guests sipped champagne and complimented Sabrina's backless gown like it was spun from royalty. When I walked in, my mother barely looked up from her mimosa. Marla gave me a hug like she was trying not to wrinkle her dress. Sabrina glanced at me and gave a nod so small it might have been a neck spasm. Uncle Darren found me near the hors d'oeuvres table. "Eliza," he said, eyes lighting up, "you made it." And for a moment, all the tension melted. For a moment, I felt real, seen, like I hadn't made a mistake. He took my hand in his. Ignore the static. Today's about clarity. I didn't fully understand what he meant. Not yet. But then came the photos. Someone tapped a glass. Family pictures, the photographer announced, cheerful and unaware. We all moved to the patio. The breeze lifted the edges of tablecloths. Cameras were readied. I stepped forward, and that's when Sabrina turned, her voice slicing through the warm spring air like a blade. I don't want her in the photos. She's bad luck. Gasps didn't follow, not immediately, just silence. Then Marla, like clockwork, laughed and added, "She ruins everything she touches." People chuckled nervously. The photographer paused. I stared at the cobblestones beneath my heels and wondered if vanishing was an option. But I didn't move. Not yet. Because that's when my uncle, my protector, my only real family in that room, put down his glass of champagne, walked up to the microphone and tapped it once. The room didn't just go quiet, it froze. And in that stillness, I felt something shift. Not just in the room, but in me. The microphone made a dull pop as my uncle tapped it. Just once. That soft, unassuming sound echoed louder than any gasp could have. Even the breeze outside the open patio seemed to still for a beat, like it was holding its breath. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. Uncle Darren's presence had always been that kind of quiet. Not the kind that begged attention, but the kind that commanded it. The kind of silence that made people lean in. And now, every head turned toward him. Champagne flutes paused midair, and Sabrina's practiced smile flickered. "Eliza," he said slowly, turning his gaze toward me. "Come here." I hesitated. My legs felt like they were rooted into the stone tiles. Every eye was on me, watching, waiting, expecting me to do what I'd always done, shrink. But something in his tone anchored me, so I walked, slowly, past Sabrina, whose eyes narrowed just enough to crack the perfect porcelain of her expression. Past Marla, who tilted her head like this was all just some awkward joke gone too far. I stepped up beside him. My hands shook slightly, but I kept them at my sides. He looked at the crowd, then back at me. "This," he said into the mic, gesturing to me with open hands, "is my niece, my family, my real family." A ripple moved through the guests, the kind of sound people make when discomfort collides with curiosity. Some turned to each other, whispering. Others just watched, frozen. Darren exhaled, a long, steady breath like he was letting go of years of pretending. "She's not bad luck. She's not a ruiner. She's the reason I'm even standing here at all." Sabrina's face didn't move, but her knuckles whitened on the stem of her glass. My cousin Marla tried to laugh, a weak little puff of air like she was still holding on to the idea that this was some kind of pre-rehearsed speech. It wasn't. She was the one who helped me rebuild my credit after my business failed. She co-signed the lease on my first warehouse when no one else in this family believed in me. She came to every hospital visit when I was sick and alone. And not once, not one damn time did she ask for anything back. He paused. The silence thickened. But when it came time to send wedding invites, when Sabrina was designing the guest list, she asked me to keep things clean. "You remember that, Sabrina?" Sabrina didn't speak. Her lips parted, but no words came out. She said Eliza's energy was too heavy, that she didn't fit the aesthetic. He looked back at me. "You know what else doesn't fit the aesthetic?" He turned to the crowd. Fake gratitude, shallow praise, and cruelty dressed up as spiritual cleansing. Someone near the back coughed. Another guest slowly set down their champagne. "I let a lot slide in this family," he continued. "I let jokes go. I let slights slide. I thought it was just part of the package, family." His eyes were sharper now, not angry, focused. But today, when I heard my bride say my niece wasn't welcome in our wedding photos, something clicked. A long pause. I could feel the tension winding around everyone's necks. I realized I was about to marry someone who didn't understand what loyalty looks like. Gasps this time. Real ones. Audible. Marla's jaw visibly dropped. Sabrina blinked rapidly, color draining from her face. I don't care how beautiful this ceremony is. I don't care how expensive the band was or how perfect the signature cocktails are. I'm not standing next to someone who can humiliate the person who kept me afloat when I was drowning. He glanced at Sabrina. This isn't working. The words landed like a grenade. Sabrina finally spoke. Darren, you're overreacting. It was a joke. You're going to throw everything away over a photo? He stared at her. It's not the photo. It's the pattern. And that was when the hush turned into chaos. Voices rose. Guests started moving. Someone dropped a glass that shattered across the tile. Sabrina turned to Marla with wild eyes, whispering fast and sharp. But Marla stepped back, hands in the air, as if suddenly the stage was too hot to stand on. Darren handed me the microphone. Eliza, he said quietly, say what you want to say. You don't have to stay quiet for them anymore. I froze, microphone in hand, heart thudding in my chest. And yet, for once, I wasn't afraid. I looked out at the crowd, at the faces that had turned from amused to stunned, at the family who never saw me as anything more than a burden. I didn't scream. I didn't gloat. I just said, you called me bad luck. But I think I just saved someone's life. Then I handed the mic back and walked off the stage. Behind me, I could hear Uncle Darren following. He wasn't just walking away from a wedding, he was walking towards something better. I didn't know where to go next. I wasn't part of the bridal party. I didn't belong in the family photo lineup. And now I wasn't just the black sheep of the family. I was the one who helped derail a six-figure wedding in real time. But I didn't run. I walked, not fast, not slow, just steady like someone who finally had permission to exist out loud. Behind me, I heard voices rising. Some guests were murmuring, some whispering urgently, others pretending to scroll their phones like they hadn't just witnessed the bride get verbally left at the altar. Without the altar, the estate had a long stone pathway that led to the gardens. I followed it, one foot in front of the other, my heels sinking slightly into the grass as I reached a quiet bench tucked beneath a rose-covered trellis. It was one of those places designed for people to take aesthetic selfies, but I didn't need a picture. I just needed a second to breathe. A few minutes passed. The air was still thick with the echoes of what had just happened. I could still hear the tremble in Sabrina's voice. I could still feel the weight of the mic in my hand. And just when I thought I'd finally get a moment to myself, I heard footsteps. Slow, hesitant, Uncle Darren. He sat down beside me, hands clasped together, still wearing the boutonniere that matched a wedding that no longer existed. I didn't mean for it to come out like that, he said softly. I shook my head. You said what needed to be said. He smiled faintly. You always had more grace than the rest of us. We sat there in silence, the kind of silence that doesn't need to be filled. Until eventually, he spoke again. She told me once, he began, that you made people uncomfortable, that your presence always shifted the energy in a room. I laughed under my breath. Well, she wasn't wrong. No, he said, she was. Because what she didn't understand was that it wasn't discomfort. It was truth. You have a way of making people see themselves. And people like her? They don't want mirrors. They want filters. That hit harder than I expected. I swallowed the lump rising in my throat and looked away, trying not to let the tears come. But they did anyway, not dramatic, sobbing tears, just quiet ones that slipped out when no one was looking. And then came the real earthquake. A tall, older man with salt and pepper hair and an earpiece in his ear, the venue manager, I assumed, stepped onto the path and approached. Mr. Langston, he said to Darren, his voice clipped and formal. We've been informed that the ceremony is not proceeding? Darren nodded once. In that case, the man continued, there are some issues. A few of the vendors are requesting immediate payment, and your event planner has stepped away. She mentioned something about not wanting to be involved in family implosions. Darren stood slowly. Tell them I'll handle it. Send the final bills to me. The man hesitated. Including the floral arch, the string quartet, and the champagne towers? All of it. And then he looked the man dead in the eye and added, and cancel the videographer. I don't want this moment edited into some fairy tale lie. The The manager nodded and retreated. That's when I realized how much my uncle had just sacrificed. This wasn't just a canceled wedding, it was a full-on detonation. Reputation, money, family relationships, all of it gone. And it didn't end there. Back at the reception area, guests were scattering. Some stayed out of curiosity, others were leaving early to avoid the inevitable drama. Sabrina was nowhere to be seen, but Marla? Oh, she was doing damage control. She's always been dramatic, I heard her say to a group of great aunts near the cake table. I think Eliza planned this. She wanted attention. I stepped back into the patio, not to confront her, but just to exist in the space she wanted me erased from. One of the aunts spotted me, looked suddenly uncomfortable, and walked away. Another raised an eyebrow at Marla and muttered, "Well, she's still here. And he's not standing next to the bride." It wasn't a win, but it was something. Then came my mother. She hadn't said much earlier, had barely looked at me in the last 2 hours. But now she marched straight toward me, clutching her little black clutch like it was a weapon. "What did you do?" she hissed. "Do you know what kind of embarrassment you've caused? This was supposed to be the biggest day of Darren's life." I stared at her for a long second, then simply said, "It still is." She blinked. "Excuse me?" "It's the day he finally saw you all for who you really are." Her mouth fell open, but I walked away before she could say anything else. I didn't need to fight anymore. The war was already over, and I wasn't the casualty this time. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was upset, not really. It was something else. A strange mixture of clarity and exhaustion that sits in your chest when everything falls apart, but you're still standing. I lay in bed with the light off, the streetlights outside tracing shadows on my wall, thinking about what had just unfolded in less than 12 hours. No bouquet toss, no vows, no garter belt dance, just one sentence, one microphone, and the kind of silence that echoes louder than any applause. By morning, I knew the fallout had begun, not in phone calls or apologies, but in posts. Because that's how this family operated. Public narrative first, truth later, if ever. It started with a picture. Sabrina had posted a black and white photo of her and my uncle from their engagement shoot, standing by the ocean, the wind in her hair, her hand over his chest. The caption was 4 words, "Not every love survives." Below it, comments bloomed like mold. "You deserve so much better." "Some people just don't understand timing or commitment." "Proud of you for staying graceful, even when others ruin the moment." Others were subtler. "Sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who bring the most chaos." "Cut the bad luck loose, sis." That one had a black heart emoji next to it. I didn't respond. I didn't even view the stories, but they were sent to me. Over and over again. Screenshots, DMS messages from cousins I hadn't heard from in years, all forwarded with captions like, "Wow, she's really spinning this." "You okay? Want me to say something?" But the worst came from Marla. She posted a short reel from the reception, just a filtered, slowed-down clip of Sabrina walking through the ceremony arch alone, the caption reading, "When you have to start over, but at least you cut out the toxins first." I stared at it for a long time. Toxin, that was me. That was the word they used. And then I saw it, in the corner of the video, just barely visible. Me, standing near the hedge, silent, blurred by the camera focus, but unmistakably there. The ghost they were trying to crop out of their curated tragedy. Still, I didn't respond. I didn't post. I didn't call Uncle Darren until he called me. "Check your email," he said simply. I did. Attached, a PDF, a formal statement from the Langston Foundation, the nonprofit my uncle had run for 10 years, the one that provided scholarships, community development programs, and was funded by both his personal money and his now canceled bride's socialite network. Subject, change in board leadership and strategic direction. In short, he'd removed Sabrina from the board, dissolved all shared financial ventures, and redirected $50,000, money that had been set aside for a flashy honeymoon press release, into a new fund under my name, the Eliza Langston Initiative for Second Chances. I stared at the screen. That name, my name, and under it, his note, "Because you gave me mine." That was when I let the tears come, not because I was sad, because I realized I'd never been the problem. I'd only been the mirror. And when people are used to their own reflections being carefully curated, a clear mirror feels violent. Later that day, my phone buzzed again, a message from Sabrina. "You win. Happy now?" I didn't reply. Then another. "Darren's making a mistake, and he'll figure that out soon. You always were good at manipulating him." Still, I didn't respond, because I wasn't in the game anymore. That evening, I walked to a nearby cafe, just me and my laptop. I ordered mint tea and sat by the window, sunlight warming the side of my face. And I opened a blank page. Not for revenge, for a speech. Uncle Darren had asked me, officially, to speak at the upcoming Langston Foundation Gala. He wanted me to share my story. Not about the wedding, not directly, but about what it means to be the bad luck girl, the outsider, the shadow, the scapegoat. I started typing. Sometimes you're not bad luck. You're just the truth someone's trying to avoid in the frame. I'd never stood behind a podium before. Not at school, not at work, not even at family dinners where people toasted over meatloaf and manipulated each other with smiles and sideways compliments. I was the listener, the background, the afterthought. But that night, I was the keynote. The Langston Foundation Gala was held in the Grand Marigold Ballroom downtown, a space so polished it felt like walking into a diamond. Chandeliers hung like upside-down gardens, and every table shimmered with navy linens and gold-foiled place cards. My card read, "Eliza Langston, Director, Second Chances Initiative." I traced my finger over the print, barely believing it was mine, barely believing that I belonged here. But I did. This time, I wasn't invited out of pity. I wasn't added to the list as a formality. I was the reason the event even existed. When Uncle Darren introduced me on stage, he didn't recite a resume. He said, "Some people earn their place in your life not by shouting, but by staying." Eliza has stayed, even when we didn't deserve her presence. That alone made my throat tighten. But I walked up, steady and silent, to the sound of polite applause. Not thunderous, not obligatory, just enough to feel respectful. The spotlight was warm against my skin. The mic hummed quietly. I cleared my throat, looked out at the crowd, donors, politicians, community leaders, and then at my uncle, seated in the front row. He gave me a small nod. That was all I needed. I began. "I was once told I ruin everything I touch." The room went still. It was said casually, like it was a joke. But the thing about those kinds of jokes is that they're never meant to be funny. They're meant to remind you of your place, especially when your place makes other people uncomfortable. A few people leaned in. I spotted one woman at the back, clutching a napkin like it was an anchor. I've spent most of my life being edited out of stories. Family photos where I was cut at the edge, conversations where I was present but never included, invitations that were more about obligation than intention. I paused, but recently I learned something. You don't have to be loud to be powerful. You just have to be unflinching. You just have to stop apologizing for being in the room. There it was again, that breathless stillness, like the audience was suspended in a space between memory and recognition. Second chances, I said, aren't just for people who made mistakes. They're also for people who were never allowed a first chance to begin with. A wave of nods swept through the crowd. This initiative exists for those who've been overlooked, underestimated, or labeled bad luck by people too afraid to see their own reflection. I let the silence sit. And then I ended with a story, not about the wedding, but about a 12-year-old girl, me, who used to wait in a car outside her uncle's job for hours, just to ride home with someone who didn't forget she existed. I told them how that uncle taught me how to read bank statements, how to fix a flat tire, and how to identify fake kindness from real compassion. When I finished, there was no eruption, no standing ovation, just deep, resonant applause, the kind that starts in people's chests and finds its way to their hands. And that was enough. When I stepped down, Darren was already rising. He wrapped me in the kind of hug that speaks louder than any "I'm proud of you." Behind him, donors started approaching, not out of curiosity, out of genuine interest. People shook my hand, asked about the initiative. One woman, a CEO of a major nonprofit, and that you just told my story without knowing me. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw her. Sabrina, standing by the back wall. She wasn't dressed for a gala, no glitter, no train, just a black trench and red lipstick that looked like armor. For a moment, I felt the urge to shrink again. That old instinct, that old wound, but I didn't. I held her gaze, calm, unmoved. She gave a tight smile and mouthed something I couldn't quite make out. Then she turned and left. She didn't stay for the dessert course. She didn't stay for the donation call. She didn't stay for the spotlight because for once, it wasn't hers. Later that night, I sat outside on the balcony with a glass of ginger tea. The city glowed beneath me, soft and pulsing. Uncle Darren joined me, his tie loosened, jacket slung over one shoulder. "You did good, kid," he said. I smiled. "We did." He nodded. "You think she'll come back?" he asked, not clarifying who. I shrugged. "They always try, but I won't be waiting." He smiled again, this time deeper. "That's the difference now, isn't it?" I nodded. "Yeah, I don't need them to see me anymore. I see myself." The envelope was plain, no return address, no stamps, just my name, written in tight slanted handwriting I recognized instantly. My mother's. She hadn't spoken to me since the wedding, hadn't called, hadn't texted. I assumed she'd retreated into silence like the rest of them, convinced that ignoring me would rewrite the narrative. But here it was, waiting on my doorstep 3 days after the gala. No explanation, no warning. I turned it over slowly. Part of me didn't want to open it. I was doing better, sleeping again, laughing even. Why dig up more rot from roots I'd already ripped out? Still, I broke the seal. Inside, 2 sheets of lined paper neatly folded. The handwriting was neat, composed, but it trembled ever so slightly in the curves, the telltale sign of someone trying to control the spin before it spiraled. "Eliza, I don't know if you'll even read this, but I need to say it. Sabrina called me the morning after the wedding. She was crying. Said Darren had humiliated her in front of everyone. Said you turned him against her, that you manipulated the moment." I scoffed out loud. "She said you had always been jealous, always wanted to be the center, and finally found a way to make the whole day about you." I told her I understood. I stopped breathing, because for a long time I did. There it was. The truth, scribbled out in blue ink. A mother who'd believed the worst of her daughter without ever asking for her side. But then something strange happened. Marla posted a screenshot from a group chat, the one where they called you useful but forgettable. Someone sent it to me thinking I'd laugh, but I didn't. I stared at that message for hours, because I realized I'd said the same things, not out loud, but in how I treated you, how I let others treat you. I let people erase you because it was easier than defending you. I chose silence. I let you carry blame that wasn't yours, and I called it family. I folded the letter in half, pressing the crease with my thumb. My eyes burned, but no tears came. Not yet. You deserved better. Not just from them, from me. If you never speak to me again, I'll understand. But I wanted you to know. I see it now. I see you. And I am sorry. It wasn't long, it wasn't poetic, but it was honest. Maybe for the first time in my life, my mother wasn't pretending. Still, I didn't call her. I didn't write back. I just sat with the letter in my lap and thought about how often apologies come wrapped in too little, too late. How people only see your value once you've left the room, stood up for yourself, or made it impossible to ignore. The next day, I received another message. This one anonymous, typed, slid under the office door of the Langston Foundation. No name, just check the archives. She was planning it all along. The account transfer, the PR launch, the optics. You weren't the only target, just the loudest consequence. Attached was a printed screenshot of a drafted press release. Sabrina Langston announces new philanthropy arm, empowering women through grace and elegance. It had been dated a week before the wedding, before the fight, before the microphone, before me. She had planned to attach her name to the foundation, make it hers. My uncle's life's work, my life's work. She'd courted donors, scheduled interviews. even pre-written an op-ed for Forbes Women, and I would have been a footnote, the scapegoat, the sacrifice. But I'd spoken. And now, the version of me she needed, silent, invisible, smiling through disrespect, no longer existed. Later that evening, I sat across from Uncle Darren in his home office. I handed him the printed screenshot. He read it slowly, said nothing for a while. Then finally, he folded the paper in half, once, then again, and he set it on top of a pile marked irrelevant. She almost had me, he admitted. But I should have known. The way she treated you was the warning. She didn't fail because of me, I said quietly. No, he agreed. She failed because she thought you were disposable. That night, I lit a candle in the garden, not for a ritual, not for drama, just to mark the end of something. I tore up the letter from my mother into small pieces and burned them in a small clay bowl, one corner at a time. Not because I was bitter, but because I was done holding space for people who only learned to value me once it was politically inconvenient not to. And as the smoke curled upward into the night sky, I whispered one final goodbye. There's this myth people believe, that peace is silence, that when things are calm and no one is shouting, healing must be happening. But I've learned that silence can be a weapon just as sharp as any insult. For years, I thought I was choosing peace by staying quiet, letting things slide, not confronting the backhanded compliments, the exclusion, the way people looked through me like I was wallpaper on the edge of their lives. But real peace, it doesn't come from walking on eggshells. It comes from finally stomping your foot down and refusing to let them crack beneath you. That's what I felt now. Not revenge, not relief, just peace, earned, claimed. The foundation had already begun receiving applications for the Second Chances initiative. Messages poured in. Stories from women who'd been cut out of businesses they helped build, from daughters disowned for being too different, from survivors of family systems that weaponized shame. Their words landed in my inbox like little sparks. They reminded me I hadn't just ended a toxic wedding. I'd opened a door. Uncle Darren stepped down as chairman 3 weeks later. Not because he was done, but because he wanted me to take it forward. I built this, he said, but you gave it its spine. I was terrified and ready. On the morning I officially took the position, I wore the same lavender dress from the wedding. Not as a symbol, not for drama, but because it was mine. I had bought it thinking I would sit quietly in the background of someone else's story, and now I was writing my own. That afternoon, I sat by the window of my office, a space I'd painted with warm tones and soft light, filled with art from local female artists we supported. I sipped coffee and watched a storm roll in, not harsh, not violent, just the kind that waters everything before the sun returns. I thought about how far I'd come from the girl, holding a glass of sparkling water while being told she ruined everything she touched. And then I remembered something Caleb, the photographer from the wedding, had messaged me after seeing the gala photos. Funny how they thought you were bad luck, you were the wake-up call. He was right. I wasn't the shadow. I was the light they couldn't control. Spring came late that year. The flowers in my backyard bloomed unevenly. Lavender first, then wild daisies, then the stubborn marigolds that refused to open until the sun felt certain. I spent a lot of mornings there, watering plants, feeding birds, brushing the leaves of herbs with my fingertips. It was simple, honest, a life not dictated by approval, just growth. One morning I found a small box on my porch. Inside was a bracelet. Not the one Alexander gave Audalyn in that other story I once listened to. Not silver, not engraved. This one was simple, braided with violet thread and a tiny charm in the center shaped like an open eye. No note, but I knew who sent it. Marla had started volunteering at a youth shelter after the wedding debacle. Word travels. One of the counselors forwarded me a letter Marla had written to herself in a reflection journal. Sometimes you don't realize who held up the family until they stop showing up. I mocked Eliza because I envied the way she kept her dignity without needing a performance. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Some things are better left as echoes. Reminders that even the ones who tried to erase you eventually look for your outline when the dust settles. My mother sent one more message the following week. I'm working on myself. I know it's not your job to notice, but I hope one day you might. I didn't block her, but I didn't open the message either. Some people want forgiveness like it's a magic eraser, but healing doesn't happen on their timeline, and I wasn't interested in healing for their comfort. That evening, I sat on my porch with a glass of white wine, the breeze tugging gently at the hem of my shirt. My phone buzzed with a tag. The Langston Foundation had posted a video from our latest mentorship circle. It was a clip of a young woman standing confidently in front of the room saying, "I always thought I needed to be smaller to be accepted, but now I'm just trying to grow loud enough to hear myself." I smiled. She'd get there. We all would. And as the sky turned to a quiet, golden dusk, I closed my eyes and thought, I wasn't bad luck. I was the break in the cycle, the moment they never saw coming, and the story that finally wrote itself in bold. Sometimes the loudest victories don't come with applause. They come with a quiet breath on your own front porch, a message left unread, a life that finally feels like yours. I didn't get the family I wanted. I didn't get the photo, the apology, or the acceptance tied with a neat little bow. But I got something better. I got free. The truth is, some people will only ever love the version of you they can control. And when that version disappears, they call you selfish, dramatic, bad luck. Let them. Because when I walked out of that wedding, when my uncle set down his glass, when the mic caught my name, when the truth cut through the silence, I didn't just walk away from a ceremony. I walked into myself, and I'm not walking back.